Welcome, everyone. I'm Mary Dean, and I'm an organizer with World Beyond War, and I'm happy to see you all here today. We're going to be talking about nuclear abolition and the reasons why we need to end war and all of the trillions of dollars this world is spending on it. So it's such a timely issue, so I'm really happy that you all have joined us in this discussion today. And I've been an organizer pretty much my whole adult life, and I've been to war zones and seen with my own eyes the horrific inhumanity and death and how our dollars are spent killing people. I've been to wars in Central America and during the wars in El Salvador and Guatemala. I spent 6 months in Honduras, which became the murder capital of the world after the U.S. Endorsed the coup there in 2009 and has 7 military bases there. I saw dead bodies by the side of the road. I went to Afghanistan in 2011 for 2 months with Voices for Creative Nonviolence, and I visited hospitals, children with 3 limbs blown off, and I just do not believe in war. So that's why we're here today and working with World Beyond War and the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, which Ellen Thomas is on tour with cross country. So welcome, Ellen Thomas.
And if you aren't familiar with World Beyond War, it's a wonderful organization David Swanson started, and he's written some amazing books about the truth about war, and I heartily recommend it. I need to tell my story from the viewpoint of being just an ordinary person who did a rather extraordinary thing. I was 37 years old in 1984 and had just moved to Washington, D.C. because I had decided, I was living in Minnesota, and I decided that nuclear weapons were an issue that I really needed to do something about. I was concerned about my children and my grandchildren and although Women Against Military Madness in Minneapolis were doing some wonderful things and certainly inspired me, nevertheless, there wasn't a whole lot that could be done in the North Woods. So I went to Washington, D.C. with my teenage daughter. She just graduated from high school, and got a job with the National Wildlife Federation as the assistant to the CEO. I had worked in real estate, I'd been a paralegal, I had done all sorts of things in my life, and at this point I was working for the CEO of the National Wildlife Federation as an administrative assistant. But in my spare time I was going around interviewing homeless people for a play I was writing about the fact that the Reagan administration was covering over the steam grates that the homeless were sleeping on and making it impossible for them to keep warm in the winter. And I was passing through Lafayette Park one night, and I happened to notice 2 Lafayette Park is on the north side of the White House, 7-acre park, quite famous. And I happened to notice 2 very large signs that were about 8 feet by 12 feet. The one on the left was, Mr. President, why don't you come out with the forced homeless? And the one on the right was a great big huge mushroom cloud that said, Revelation, this need not be our end. And I thought, whoa, this need not be, revelation, like, yeah. Mr. President, why don't you come out with the forced homeless? Forced homeless, yes. Let's hold our questions until the end, if you don't mind. So these were 2 issues that I cared deeply about, and there was a little woman lying between these 2 signs, wearing nothing to protect her except a ski suit and a wig. And I asked her how long she'd been there. She said 3 years, day and night. I said, do you do this by yourself? She said, no, I have a friend. He's a philosopher. His name is Thomas. So I came back the next day to meet this philosopher. 3 weeks later, I gave everything I owned to my daughter, and joined the vigil in front of the White House. And 3 weeks after that, Thomas and I were married in Lafayette Park. And as far as I'm concerned, we're still married, although he died in 2009. But he was the most remarkable person I ever met. There's a picture of him over there on a postcard where you can get a look at him. And you may have seen him because he was in front of the White House for over 27 years before he died. He founded the vigil. So we had all sorts of adventures. We beat on drums 40 days and 40 nights in 1991 to stop the first Gulf War, and I think we actually had an effect there. And made a video about that called The Ground War at Home, which is on YouTube if you want to watch it. And in 1993, we brought a voter initiative to the people of Washington, D.C., asking that Congress pass a constitutional amendment to abolish nuclear weapons and use the money saved instead for human needs. And Eleanor Holmes Norton, who was a new congresswoman at the time, said on the radio that she would not introduce the bill even if it won before the election. But it did win, and with a rather sizable percentage of the population. People were coming out saying, how could you vote against it? And so she changed her mind and talked with us, and we said, well, we don't have to have a constitutional amendment, because she said she'd be the laughing stock of Congress if she were to introduce that. So she has introduced a bill every session since 1994 called the Nuclear Weapons Abolition and Economic and Energy Conversion Act, which is a lot of words, and you can't make it into an acronym, but it's a statement of purpose from the United States to the world, and I'm going to go over this with you so that you understand it. There's some dates and things in here that are not important to the essence of the bill, and there's copies of her dear colleague letter and the text of the bill last session over on the table that you can get. What it's saying is the U.S. government shall provide leadership in negotiating and entering into a multilateral treaty or other international agreement for the dismantlement and elimination of all nuclear weapons in every country under strict and effective international control, and redirect the resources that are being used for nuclear weapons programs in converting all nuclear weapons industries smoothly to constructive, ecologically beneficial peacetime activities, including strict control of all fissile material and radioactive waste during the period in which nuclear weapons must be dismantled, so do it simultaneously, not afterwards, and in addressing human and infrastructure needs, including development and deployment of sustainable, carbon-free, nuclear-free energy sources, and healthcare, and housing, and education, agriculture, environmental restoration, including long-term radioactive waste monitoring. The next clause, you have to look at it from the viewpoint that the United States says that this is what it wants, but it's not acting that way. It says, undertake vigorous good faith effort to eliminate war, armed conflict, and all military operations. The United States has more military bases around the world than I can even conceive of. And the military operations seem to me to be coming from the United States. So if they're trying to eliminate war by making war, it's not a very good way to do it. So good faith, that's what we want. We want the United States to be living up to its own standards, which we have not been doing for a very long time, which you can talk to. And actively promote policies to induce all other countries to join in these commitments. So there's a lot of work to be done to make it happen, but what it basically is saying is we want to take those billions, well, trillions of dollars that are currently going into or plan to go into nuclear weapons over the next 30 years. In 2010, I don't know if you're aware of this, but President Obama okayed I think it was the Senate, I'm not sure, was it the Senate bill that there was going to be a $1.3 trillion investment in modernizing the nuclear weapons program in exchange for signing on ratifying the agreement, the New START agreement in 2010. $1.3 trillion to modernize nuclear weapons. Our nuclear weapons are perfectly capable of destroying life on Earth many times over, as they are right now. We don't need to modernize them. What do they want to do? They want to make smaller, better, easier ways to kill each other? So we're saying instead of spending money on that, we should be spending money on converting all the arms industries, not just the nuclear, not just the radioactive, but all the arms industries, to such things as carbon-free, nuclear-free energy sources, and for paying for health care and for education and and environmental restoration. And go ahead, don't tell these companies that are making so much money off of the taxpayers that's going to be used to kill people that they can't work anymore, that they can't make a living. Just change what they're doing, you know. Pay the industrialists to retool their factories to start mass producing solar panels and windmills and other marvelous gadgets as they come up. And pay the workers to be retrained while they're waiting to start their new jobs. Go ahead and keep everybody okay, but then use that money for human needs and for cleaning up the terrible mess that has been made in the last century. We have done so much harm, and we all know that. I'm preaching to the choir when I talk about the perhaps irreparable harm that we've done to the, and we don't have time. We don't have time to waste talking about these things. We need to send a message to the world. This is what the United States is really about. You know, you guys think we're a bunch of imperialists. Well, there are a few of us who are, and they get a lot of attention. But most of us want to fix these problems because we want our children to have a future. So Ms. Norton has not reintroduced the bills this session, and she's not answering my phone calls. So I'm thinking that she's tired of introducing it all by herself. She's been doing it for 23 years now. And she gets co-sponsors, but it's after the fact. It's always just her bill. And I think this session she wants some co-sponsors when she introduces the bills, like the Markey Liu bill, you know, where there's 2 names or 4 names on it, so that she's not standing there all by herself doing this very courageous thing. So please, we met with some legislators' aides today, and please let your senators and your representative know that you support Norton's bill. You hope that she reintroduces it, and you hope that they will be on the bill when she does reintroduce it. Or if she doesn't, that they will introduce it themselves, because we need to send this message to the world pretty quick. There are other serious issues that exist. Nuclear power plants, for example. We need to get rid of nuclear power, not only because it's producing terrible waste we don't know what to do with, but also because that waste, some of it, is highly enriched uranium and plutonium, which is used for making bombs. And in order to get rid of nuclear weapons, we have to get rid of nuclear power plants, at least the kind of nuclear power plant that is currently designed and built. So although Norton's bill doesn't specifically address that, I, on behalf of Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, am addressing that and saying that we need to do what we can to shut down the nuclear power plants and to really build a sustainable carbon-free, nuclear-free energy system where everybody's feeding into the grid. And these power companies can do it if their mindset is there. There's very little that they can't do to change this over. It's just that they don't see how they're going to make the money by doing it. So we need to figure that out. Just imagine if the teachers and the researchers in the universities and the engineers that are currently working on making better ways to kill each other were able to use their resources and their brains to be thinking of better ways to make clean energy. We could really solve this problem in a hurry. So that's what I really care about. Now we're at a very pivotal time. Of course, it's really scary, the blustering between President Obama and North Korea's President Kim, and we need to support the United Nations General Assembly, which is coming together on June 19th, from June 19th to July 7th, to enter into the next phase of negotiating the nuclear weapons ban treaty. It's a very exciting time because this has never been done before. There's been various conventions and meetings and discussions about disarmament, but this is abolition of nuclear weapons. That is a really exciting thing. And Norton's bill has had that written in. It's been in her bill for several sessions now in exactly that language, so I have to give her credit for that. There are also lots of sites around the country that are very polluted with radioactivity. And there's a bill that Raul Grijalva, who is the co-chair of the Progressive Caucus in the House of Representatives, has been working on with Defenders of the Black Hills and others, called the Uranium Mining Moratorium and Cleanup Act. There are 15,000 uranium mines that are still blowing around in the wind in the western part of the United States, mostly on Native American lands. And this needs to be cleaned up, and we need to stop mining uranium. We don't need any more uranium. We need to cease and desist. So we're asking that your representatives co-sponsor Raul Grijalva's bill, as well as Eleanor Holmes Norton's nuclear weapons abolition bill. And there are three things that I think are extremely dangerous that I want to tell people about that most people don't know anything about, and we need to be sharing this information with others. And I try to do that, and I'll tell you more about that later. But there is a plan afoot to ship 100 to 150 trucks with large canisters in them with liquid, highly radioactive waste from Chalk River, Canada to the Savannah River site in South Carolina. They either will go around through Niagara Falls and down through the East Coast, and they're not telling what routes they're going to take, or they'll come around the Great Lakes and come some other way. They're going to go lots of different ways, and there's a handful of people who have been fighting really hard to stop this. Congressman Higgins in New York, in Niagara Falls, is working to stop this. So supporting him with that, with stopping these shipments, is something that your legislators can do. And Nuclear Fuel Services is a plant in Irwin, Tennessee, in a beautiful little mountain valley that has the Nolichucky River running through. And the name sounds just like it looks. It's a whitewater river where people like to go, canoeing and kayaking and all the fishing and swimming. And for 60 years now, there has been a plant that has been putting uranium, plutonium, and other horrible things into this beautiful little river. And a friend of mine, who is also a member of Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, she in 2010 started doing some research and went and hammered galvanized pipes into the sediment along the shore of 95 miles down the Nolichucky River to Douglas Lake, and carried them up to her car and sent them off to a lab to be tested. And every one of them was tested with really nasty stuff that had the signature of Nuclear Fuel Services. And within 3 years, she had cancer on her forearms, melanoma, and she had stomach cancer, and she's had 3 surgeries to deal with those things. There was a poodle that drank out of the water and 2 hours later went into convulsions and died. And people are drinking the water out of there. There's a school that is very close to the river and to Nuclear Fuel Services that had what do you call those when a hole appears in the ground? A sinkhole.
Right,
A sinkhole, yeah, that opened up on the playground. And so they closed down the school and did some tests, and then they permanently closed the school and started shipping the kids elsewhere. Somebody did a survey of one of the streets in this little bitty town that is just a few blocks from the Nolichucky River and a few blocks from nuclear fuel services, and they interviewed 42 families, and out of those 42 families, 27 of them had people who had either died or had surgery for cancer. It's a hellhole, and nobody's doing anything about it. There's this wall of women there, Linda is one of them, that have been trying to do something about it and raising a ruckus about it. And when Gregory Jasko was the head of the NRC, he was going to order a cancer survey, and then he got hounded out, and that cancer survey was canceled, and the life extension was, the plant was extended for another 25 years of operation. I don't understand the thinking of these people who keep doing this. It's beyond me. You know, some people say that they just don't want to think about it because they don't feel like there's anything they can do about it. But I've seen a few miracles in my life, and I do think that if we raise a ruckus, we can do something. I mean, Rocky Flats, whoever thought Rocky Flats and Hanford and all these other nuclear weapons facilities would get shut down, but under George H.W. Bush, they did in 1989, and that was good. And after what just happened at Hanford, we can be very grateful that there weren't more people around. But did you hear that there was a collapse of the tunnel in Hanford? And yeah, it's a bad scene. Another bad scene is St. Louis, Missouri. There is the West Lake Landfill, where 47 tons of radioactive Manhattan Project waste is sitting there, and there's an underground fire that is out of control, and it's headed towards that pile, and there's a community, a suburban community that didn't realize what they were next to, that have been getting sick from the fact that they're growing up next to this landfill. But now with this fire, it's really scary, and they've asked the state of Missouri to please help them get out of there and get new homes. And the state of Missouri, according to, I spoke to Lacey Clay's, Representative Lacey Clay's aide. Lacey Clay signed on to Eleanor Holmes Norton's bill last year because he said, do you think that if this bill passes that we can get some help with the West Lake landfill? And I said, yes, I do, because that's where the money would be going. But now it's not. So we need to ask for some help for these people to get out of there and to clean that thing up. And, well, there's all sorts of other stuff that's horrible that we don't want to think about, but we should. And I believe that my jobs are, number one, to hope. I think I was born to hope. I just can't help hoping, you know, because I get to know people one-on-one, and people are basically, when you get to know them, most of them are pretty decent. It's just that there's this collective inability to follow through, inability to trust your own judgment. I don't know what it is. It's more than, it's not apathy, it's a sense of hopelessness and helplessness. But I proved to myself that by stepping out and deciding I wasn't going to work for money, I was just going to work for the things that I cared about, that I can do it. I've done it. I've been doing it since 1984. People who think that what I'm doing is important help in different ways, and it inspires other people to do it, and that's what we each can do. We can have vigils, you know, a vigil. In my experience, if you go out and march around, it's good for you. If you go out and vigil, it's good for everybody, because you're consistent, and they may see you today and not do anything for a year, but they come back a year later and you're still there, and they'll say, okay, tell me what it is that you're here for. I want to know. And then you can change their lives, and you're planting seeds. You never know what's going to happen with those seeds. But just being out there and speaking out and telling people what the truth is and what you believe and listening to what they have to say and try to brainstorm good ideas, we can change the world, I think. That's my hope part. And my other two jobs are to learn as much as I can and to share as much as I can, what I learn. And in that regard, I've been working more. I established Nuke News, Nucnews, on Yahoo Groups in 1998, and every day have been adding stories that come up, and people send me stories by emails, and I share them on Nuke News at Yahoo Groups. But recently I started having some fun with Facebook, because Facebook, let's face it, it's overwhelming. There's just too much. You start looking at your news feed and your timeline and all that stuff, and whoa, what am I going to do with all this stuff? So what I've decided to do is to create a couple of sites that can help you to learn and keep learning without being overwhelmed. Nuke News, Nucnews, on Facebook, and Eye on Congress. There's not a lot on there, but when I get good stories about good things that Congresses, both of the United States and of the various states, are doing, and bad things that they're doing, I put that up there. And there's a Facebook page for Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. And just for those of you who don't know what that is, it's a 102-year-old organization begun by Jane Addams in 1915 and other women who met at The Hague and created this international organization to try to stop what's now known as the First World War. They were calling it the Great War in those days. And it's women and men who have been working one after the other for 102 years for the same thing. And I'm co-chair of the Disarm End Wars Committee, and there is a flyer over there on the table that's a fold-over flyer. I don't think I'll have that here. But that was written by a really brilliant woman by the name of Carol Erner, which basically outlines WILP's position on nuclear issues. And there also is a flyer from beyondnuclear.org. They have this online. It's really good. It's the most up-to-date showing of all of the nuclear power plants that are in operation. So San Onofre went off last year, and they took that off. That doesn't mean they're cleaned up yet, but at least they're not operating. And let's see if there's anything else here that I want to share. I think that's about it.
All right. Well, thank you, Ellen. That was very inspiring.
So does anybody have any questions? And I'd like to,
I just wanted to say a
Oh,
few
yeah,
words,
I'm
too.
sorry, yeah.
I remember I must have seen Ellen because I've been in front of the White House many times protesting over the years, so I'm sure we must have ran into each other before. But Ellen's also part of World Beyond War, which is whom I've worked for. We have a website, worldbeyondwar.org, and we encourage everyone to go on there if you're against war and sign the petition there, because we collect the numbers, how many people around the world are against war. And in my personal experience, traveling to many different war zones and countries that the U.S. is at war with, in Iran, Afghanistan, Cuba, when the U.S. was funding war in Guatemala, El Salvador, and then when I was in Honduras with our 7 military bases over there, every person I met said that they were against war. Like, no one wants to be at war. And as far as security, like, I've heard people bring that concern to me. Well, what about terrorism? That's the first question I usually get. And I believe our country are the biggest terrorists of all, sad to say. But we are spending the most money on weapons and using the most weapons of any country around the world. Like, if you combine the military spending of the next 10 countries, the U.S. is spending way more. In 2015, we were spending $596 billion a year. I mean, imagine what we could be doing with that money. You know, I used to work in healthcare. I was a physical therapist for 23 years. You know, I had children who couldn't even get wheelchairs or physical therapy services because it was so limited. And now we're seeing what's happening with this healthcare bill in the Congress. They're trying to cut spending for that. There is more than enough money in our budget to pay for good healthcare, education, green jobs. We could, you know, reconstruct our country, all this infrastructure collapsing, whether it's bridges, you know. We could put solar energy on every building with all of this money we're wasting on war. And also the military is the #1 polluter. I think we should keep that in mind as our Earth, you know, is being more and more polluted. We read about this every day, about the climate change. So that's another issue. Also, our police are becoming more militarized as well. You know, all of this military equipment, you know, it's given to police forces after it's retired. They're receiving military training, you know, whether in Israel or here in the U.S., and they're using it at home on people. So it's becoming more and more dangerous, especially for people of color. So those are my main points. Let me see if I'm missing anything. As far as housing, like, you know, everyone passes by homeless people on the streets every day. I mean, imagine, you know, what housing we could build with all of these trillions of dollars. And veterans, we should be taking care of our veterans. Why are they not having enough services that they need coming home, you know, with PTSD, and all of that could be prevented, as well as the people in other countries who have PTSD, which is just absolutely widespread. I mean, I remember the children that I was with in Afghanistan, you know, not being able to sleep at night and having horrible nightmares, and, you know, hearing like the drone sounds. They couldn't even fly kites because it was so dangerous. And the constant surveillance, that's another issue. Like there were drones flying overhead all over when we were in Kabul, you know, and here our telephones are being recorded, you know, at all times. I mean, that's just a product of our militarized culture as well. So I would encourage all of you to go onto our website, worldbeyondwar.org, sign our petition. If you're here today, you could sign it up over there. It's by the door.
And also mine. I have a petition there supporting the bill.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And Ellen has a petition as well. And also, we're encouraging people to form chapters in your own towns. If you're not from Chicago, we have a chapter going here in Chicago. We have a Facebook page. We have a Chicago chapter of World Beyond War, and also a regular World Beyond War Facebook page. So yeah, there's always something to do. Whatever level you're able to, I believe every person can do something. So does anyone have any questions? Yes.
To Mary, this petition, now I belong to a religious community, and many of the sisters, first of all, our community took its first corporate stand against exorbitant military spending, and we stand for that. The whole community has done that consensus. Now they would all sign this, but they don't all have computer access. Is it possible that I can collect their signatures and you can count them even though they don't?
Yes. I have extra sheets today with signatures. She's asking about how to collect signatures. Also, you can download them from the website as well at worldbeyondwar.org, and I have signature sheets here today.
We would mail them to you, service mail.
Yes. You can mail them or scan them, whichever way. Or just go on the website for people who have the internet to sign it.
The petition I have over there is to support the nuclear weapons abolition bill and to ask your representative to co-sponsor it. And there are extra copies, so if you want to take one of those, you can. And the text of the bill is on the back of this flyer.
Also, I have just one more quick announcement. We're going to have a march or a rally on June 17th, Women Ban the Bomb, and it's an international march sponsored by the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, World Beyond War, the Chicago Area Peace Action Group, and that's going to be at, I believe, the Federal Plaza. We're still working on that.
10 a.m.
From 10 to 1, right? Yes, on June 17th.
And we're also doing a film showing
Okay, and a film showing,
June 3rd at the Wilmette Library
June
at 3 p.m.
June 3rd at the Wilmette Library at 3 p.m.
Yeah, it's a film about nukes and why we shouldn't have them.
Okay, great, a film about nuclear weapons and why we shouldn't have them.
Yes.
The reason why, one of the main reasons why war continues is because it's profitable. Have you thought about, or is there any move to figure out a way to make peace profitable so that if that catches fire, then there would be, I mean, actually, people can feel like they're making money, you know, corporatists can feel like they're making money off of it.
I mean, definitely renewables, you know, it could be converted to renewable energy, you know, nuclear energy, and we could create green jobs with all of this money we're spending on war. I mean, it would be a conversion process, but it definitely could be profitable.
You didn't mean convert to nuclear, you meant convert.
Convert away from nuclear into renewables.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, the way the money's counted, you destroy it, and then you have companies build it. So it's a win-win both ways. You know, you make profit both ways. So I think that's the problem, is that peace is not profitable enough, and so that's why it continues to be out of our grasp.
Well, maybe we need to think about how to make war unprofitable. I don't know. I mean, consider the two of them, but we have to change our way of thinking. It's going to require some serious thought on everybody's part how to make this happen. But I think it's easy for them to make money now because they've got this whole routine down, right? You know, they got the factories making more and more stuff. But if we are willing to pay them to stop doing that and to change over to something else which has already proven itself to be profitable, solar and wind are now paying for themselves, and they're doing better than paying for themselves. And if we're actually mass producing it, it's going to be a lot more profitable because it'll be cheaper to make once they retool the factories and retrain the workers. They're not going to lose their jobs. They're just going to change what they're doing and feel a lot better about it. So I think we have to. I've had a few people come up to me, and, well, like, for example, Dr. Helen Caldecott, when I first approached her, the first couple of times I approached her, and she says, no, the United States and Russia have to do it. And they've got to start it because they started the whole arms race. And I said, well, it's a nice idea, but it's not going to happen. Everybody has to do it. You know, there's this wonderful story, science fiction story I read many years ago, and I've been trying to figure out who wrote it. And if you know, please tell me. It's about this pioneer family that is living on another planet, and they're about to go home to Garden Earth they get to go home to Garden Earth every 20 years or something like that. And the kids are asking him, how come they call it Garden Earth? And they say, well, we almost destroyed life on the planet with our nuclear weapons. But what happened was that the country that had the most reduced down to the country that had the second most, which reduced down to the country with the third most, and so on until everybody had the same number of nuclear weapons, and they had a great big party, and everybody got rid of them all together. Well, that's a very simple idea, but it makes sense, you know? Why not do it that way? So who's got the most nuclear weapons right now? Is it Russia or the United States? All right. Let's keep going. Let's do that. It's doable if we just make up our minds to do it. And the people who are in power right now aren't going to make up their minds to do it unless we tell them to. So we can't just sit back and wait for them to do the right thing. We have to tell them what the right thing is, and we have to insist. And, you know, maybe even run for office if you're so inspired, you know. Get involved. Don't run away from the problem. Run towards it and deal with it. Fix it. I like to say that if you see a problem that isn't being dealt with, there's nobody else who's taking care of it, then it must be your job to do it.
Also, I brought some information that just addresses that exact point. And there was a woman who did research with Brown University, Heidi, Garrett, Peltier, and she wrote The Job Opportunity Cost of War. And she found that Pentagon spending is the least effective way to create jobs. She said that $1 billion invested in education will create twice as many jobs as $1 billion invested in the military. And she looked at different aspects: education, healthcare, clean energy, and tax cuts for personal consumption. And she found that the military created the fewest jobs out of those other four areas. So if anyone wants to read it, it's called The Job Opportunity Cost of War. Any other questions?
Thank you both. This is very inspiring. Could you, Ellen, talk about where in the world, I'm sure you're in touch with activists all around the globe, where do you, and it's so wonderful to see how hopeful you are after all these years of staying at it. I think the burnout ratio of activists is too high, and so clearly you are getting hope. Can you tell us about someone or group around the world that has inspired you and who you think is someplace we should be looking for inspiration in their own fight against nuclear weaponry? Are there places where, I mean, the recent news in South Korea is hopeful, this new guy who's willing, hopefully, to negotiate, but are there places where you felt people are?
Well, there's lots of nuclear-free zones now, big ones too. So people have rejected nuclear weapons in many places around the world. But the most exciting thing I see right now is what's happening with the UN Security Council. It's an opportunity, and there's this Women's March to Ban the Bomb is going to be on June 17th. It was started to be in New York, to go to the United Nations and to show support for what they're doing. And I'm saying that we as Americans need to go and demand that the United States be there. As far as, yes, there's people all over the world who are working on this issue. And I'm sorry, but I wasn't prepared to answer that question by thinking about it. So, but if you go to Nuke News, I promise you that I will share some of that information with you.
Do you have any questions? Oh, yes, I was wondering, you talked about running for office, and I'm the past secretary of the Illinois Green Party, and I'm wondering, it seems like we keep asking our legislators, and if most people want peace, and if most people want, renewable energy, but we can't have it, then our legislators are failing to represent us. And so I'm wondering if you ever think about supporting a third party, or thinking in terms of a third party for supporting, because you wouldn't have to beg. Instead of having to go to your legislator to beg, you wouldn't have to, because it's already part of the Green Party charter that you should get rid of nuclear power and get rid of nuclear weapons and have peace. So.
Yes, I was a D.C. statehood Green Party delegate in Washington, D.C. years ago. And I went to New Zealand, and of course New Zealand was the first country to declare itself nuclear weapons free. And I went to their parliament, and I just loved it, because they have the same number, they have a percentage of the parliament the same as the percentage of the voter, what party the voters have voted for. I think that's a marvelous idea. This two-party system that's chosen by an electoral college that does whatever they darn well please is a really lousy system. I think becoming parliamentary might not be a bad idea. Of course, that means changing the Constitution, and we're not going to mess around with that. But certainly the Green Party, I love what they stand for. I did go to a Green Party meeting in Asheville, North Carolina, where I felt like the people who were there were a little paranoid, a little concerned about don't talk to anybody about our business. Our business is our own business. And I thought, another political party. I don't want anything to do with it. But yeah, we have to try to change it. Yeah, it'd be wonderful if the young people would come up with a new political party that none of the rest of us even thought of, and start. Because the kids, it's their world, right?
Yes.
We need to encourage them to make changes. And if you've got any ideas about how to recruit young people into WILP, I'll be glad to hear them.
Any other questions? Yes.
This is more of a comment. One of the things that the Green Party in Illinois did that I thought was very effective was they decided to run some qualified candidates for Metropolitan Sanitary District commissioners. We send air to Ohio, and we send liquid effluent all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico, and there are 7 million of us doing it. So it made sense that Sanitary District Commissioner was a good thing for the Greens to go for. I believe it now is back to pretty much being Democrats and Republicans, but the lasting difference that the Green Party made was that the Democratic candidates for Metropolitan Commissioner were actually qualified people. It was not a political plum. They actually got folks that knew something about waste disposal. You think, okay, go Greens.
Bravo, yeah.
That's great to hear.
What do you think of President Trump's talk about, making friends with Russia? Is that a hopeful sign for you?
Well, he said a couple of things that actually made me feel a little less afraid when he was campaigning, and although he's been very blustering since he became president, seems to be calming down a little bit. But yeah, I think we need to make friends with Russia. Certainly, we need to make friends with everybody. And I think, making a big deal out of people talking to people in Russia, I'm not sure that, I think that's a lot of hoopla to just try to destroy the administration, and it's been happening back and forth for a long time, and they haven't been getting anything done because they're so busy playing politics. That's how I feel about it. What do you think?
Well, I actually think Trump did lie. He said he was going to end war, before he became elected, and now he's, increased bombing, and whether it's Syria, Afghanistan, he's talking about increasing troops to Afghanistan. As far as Russia, I think we should have diplomacy with every country, but if he had some illegal business deals with Russia, I think he should be impeached for that because he broke the law. And, in corruption, anyone who's corrupt and breaks the law should be impeached over that. But I do believe in diplomacy with every single country, and that is the way we are going to end war, through diplomacy, humanitarian aid, reparations, that kind of thing. That's how we're going to, end terrorism and end war. So.
Does that answer your question? Yeah. Yes.
Mine also is more of a comment than a question. A couple of things that I would like to maybe enrich the discussion with, or try to. As a couple of main things is as to Trump. I was reading an article by Matt Taibbi out of Rolling Stone, who's written it within the last week, who says that Trump has largely flip-flopped on a lot of these issues. At first, he said NATO was superfluous, it could be eliminated. That was during the campaign. Now, with his bombing of Syria, he's found that he gets all these adulations from the mainstream, from guys like Brian Williams at MSNBC and Faroud Zachariah and these kind of people who are slobbering all over Trump for looking presidential because he can launch these missile attacks, 59 cruise missiles on Syria. That similarly, because Trump now's focus is more on getting the approval of the Republican establishment, insofar as there's any such thing. Now he's also flip-flopping on that Russia thing. And then going back a little further on that, ironically, funny enough, if it is indeed funny, initially when Trump, that was perhaps one of the redeeming things about him, was that he wanted to make nice with Russia. It was the Democrats who were so adamant about no détente between Trump and Russia. A very complicated issue, sure. And then there was one other thing that I'm escaping my mind that I wanted to address. But, I think these are issues maybe we could discuss a little more elaborately.
It's very interesting times right now.
Oh, I know what the other thing, if I may, about young people. I think if I'm sensing it right, and other people are making the same comment too, young people of necessity are becoming more engaged politically. And I heard this thing, I kind of think that there's a lot of truth in it, resonating something that you said, is that the world belongs to the young people, is we've got to kind of just try to hang on, we old folks, for the young people to come along and grab our coattails as far as, we've been able to drag them and move on toward a more peaceful world.
Right. And we need to go to their events. We can't expect them to come to ours if they don't know who we are, so we need to show up and support the work that they're doing and be excited about it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So it's really, really nice of you all to come and be with us. And I really hope that you will sign my petition and make sure that your zip code is clear and make sure that your email is clear so that I can send you an email. And if you don't want to hear from me again, you just say so. But it's delightful to meet you, and I'm really, really thankful to you, Mary, for arranging this event. And I thank you for recording it, too. I hope you'll give me the URL. Okay. So help yourself to what's over there.
And feel free to take a flyer from World Beyond War and sign our petition, and, email me if you have any questions or you want to have an event, sponsored by your church or organization or school. Be happy to go there and speak as well. So thank you very much.